At Governance Institute of Australia, we believe that every good decision starts with the right capability. Why? Because decisions shape outcomes. Good outcomes build trust, and that trust defines leadership. Governance is more than dealing with compliance and risk. It's the vehicle for better choices. Better choices for individuals in the changing face of the workforce, and better choices for organisations dealing with the changing regulatory and competition environments. We want to give you the knowledge, confidence, and practical skills to enable you to make another good decision. Today on the show, let's explore what this means in terms of the future of work and how AI is not only changing the shape of organisations, but what are some of the emerging ethical questions we need to ask ourselves? I'm joined today by Beth Hall, Director of Culture Edge. So Beth, the first question I wanted to talk about was around human capabilities. So why are they so important when we look at things like the future of work?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. When we think about the focus on AI is most certainly going to out-knowledge us, but it's not going to be able to out-human us. So really focusing and doubling down on human capability is where we really get that sweet spot with that transdisciplinary work, whereby AI is doing a lot of the manual work for us, and our focus is on the higher level of cognitive thinking, systems thinking, the human emotional and social intelligence side of things, the creativity side of things is really going to be where we're playing a huge role that AI can't play for us.
Fantastic. So you mentioned AI. What are some of the major skills that will be most prominent when we look at the future of the workforce? And is there a skills gap currently?
It's interesting when we talk about skills because we've talked about upskilling and reskilling for years now in order to be able to keep pace with the expectations around change and delivery. And the reality is that we cannot keep up with the skills gap. We need to stop talking about skills and we need to start talking about capabilities. And when I say capabilities, I'm talking about both skills, knowledge, behavior, and context. Because when we look at skills in isolation without the context, we might be able to perform certain tasks within certain conditions, but as soon as those conditions change, we're at a loss and we're not able to actually deliver in our roles anymore. Capabilities have a lot longer shelf life than skills. So, for example, if I was to give you a basic example of you training me on the skills of using a software program and showing me where the buttons were and showing me how to use the various different features of the program, but then the program changes, the buttons move, the software changes as the company evolves and grows, and then we're in a position where me as a team member doesn't have the skills to be able to perform in my role. Whereas if we look at the capability of digital literacy and you give me all of the capabilities required to be able to use my skills and knowledge within a varying different contexts as well as behavior, and I'm in a much better position. So they have a longer shelf life. So I would say the capabilities of the future are human, as you've mentioned. So the emotional and social intelligence is going to be key. Trust and ethics is going to be a huge focus, particularly as we start to diverge our work alongside AI. Digital literacy that I've already mentioned, and also critical thinking. So that's systems thinking, higher level. We're going to be solving more complex problems that machines can't solve for us, and they're going to be the real capabilities of the future.
You really emphasize the critical thinking. So in the absence of, let's hypothetically say with AI, it's regulation might be lagging behind. What organizations can really do to keep at the forefront is look at those human capabilities like critical thinking. Is that correct?
Yeah, critical thinking, emotional and social intelligence, making sure that, like, when we're using AI, we need to be really mindful that AI is, your dodgy intern. It doesn't have the lived experiences that we have as humans. So would you trust your dodgy intern with high level decision making and judgment and ethical decision making at an organizational level? No, you probably wouldn't. Now, you would allow your dodgy intern to go and do some research and gather some data for you and gather some information, but you would then bring your own judgment and decision making to the party to be able to make those calls. So I always talk about AI being, there's AI, but you've got to have human in the loop, because that human is there to make sure that we don't have bias, we don't have over exaggerations of data or conclusions. You'll know yourself from using AI, it's not always accurate. Some people use it for the first draft, some people use it to refine things for their final draft, and it's learning, it's getting a lot more sophisticated, but equally it's not going to have the human capability that we have. And there's going to be a huge focus on collaboration and community and bringing divergent thinking together, as AI is going to take those low-level automated tasks off us.
Do you think there's a culture aspect to all of this when looking at implementing the capabilities that are needed for the future of work? A positive culture in an organisation to adopt these capabilities, is that needed?
Oh, it's a huge cultural shift. It's a total change in behaviour at work. When we think about our early career people, they join as their first job and they don't know how to navigate office politics. They don't know how to deal with meetings. They're probably not experienced anything contextually in the environment that they've come from, which is schools or universities. And previously, we would give them the time and space to be able to observe and learn from mentors and be able to navigate this world of work while doing pretty low level, low risk administrative tasks. Now that AI is doing all of those things, we're bringing them in and asking them to do tasks that are more at mid-career level thinking and mid-career level risk and decision making. So we need to change the way we think about work, the way we think about building capability, the way we think about collaboration and community. We need to think about AI in relation to an aging workforce and who is actually informing some of these decisions and judgment tools that we're building over time. And it's a great opportunity. I'm really excited about AI, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to be very mindful and think about it at a systems level, not just an individual level, because we'll all be using it in different ways for different things. But organizationally, what are we choosing to use AI for, and how is that shaping our culture and our workforces moving forward?
Fantastic. And in your presentation recently at Governance Institute's Governance and Risk Management Forum in Sydney, you had a great way of explaining sort of the vertical disciplines, how they've been evolved and managing sort of T-shaped people now. I was wondering if you could sort of take me through a bit of that thinking around what you sort of presented at that recent conference.
Yeah, sure. Look, many years ago, we used to, and still to a certain extent today, we recognize individuals that are expertise within their function. So that's an I-shaped model whereby we design work around experts. So you are the expert in finance, you are the expert in risk, you are the expert in strategy. And we essentially built these silos and we rewarded and recognized and drove performance through this I-shaped way of working. And then we realized that, hang on, working in isolation is not driving teamwork. We're not actually getting the best out of our leaders and our organizations because people aren't looking at things from a business context. So we moved to a T-shaped model and we started to challenge our executives and leaders to not just think about their own patch, but also work across the business and to be able to collaborate better with their peer groups to be able to create holistic solutions to organizational problems. And that T-shape in some organizations is really mature and working really well. In other organizations, there's still a lot of conflict. There's still a lot of budget, my budget, your budget. No, we're not going after the same thing because my team need this or my team need that. So we are still working on how do we collaborate better within that T-shaped way of working. But the reality is AI is going to move us into more transdisciplinary work, whereby we're looking at the X, we're looking at across all of the organization, how are we connecting human resource, technological resource to be able to get the job done, and also how we're looking at tasks holistically. So as AI is doing a lot of the doing for us, we're going to be in that higher order thinking, systems thinking, more complex problem solving. It's going to require multidisciplinary focus whereby experts are coming from all over the organization to be able to solve problems. So that human, social, emotional intelligence and collaboration community is going to be a huge focus for organizations moving forward.
Fantastic. And do you think there's a proficiency gap in the current workforce as it is?
Yeah, look, the latest stats suggest that we're going to, the roles that we have today are not going to exist tomorrow. There's a stat that's come out recently to say 1 in 5 of Australian workers are not proficient in their roles. And the reality is, when you dig down into that data, it's not through lack of skills or lack of training, it's actually through the speed of change. So because we're operating in an environment whereby change that we're experiencing today is the most amount of change we've ever experienced in our lives, and the same can be said for tomorrow, we're in a position where team members are saying, okay, I can't do this the way I used to do it. Now, how do I do it differently? So therefore, I might not be as quick or as efficient at delivering an outcome, or I might not have to learn and relearn things at such a pace that is going to affect my effectiveness and proficiency within my role. Now, the good news is AI is helping us do a lot of the doing. So therefore, latest statistics are suggesting that we're 5 times faster with AI. And I would agree, AI has almost become my additional teammate. Everything that I do, I'm talking and having a conversation with AI in order to be able to collaborate better. But the use of AI and constant change and expectation, which is why we have psychosocial legislation, why we're saying we need to be clear with our team, is because we're operating in this constantly changing context and environment that is impacting our ability to be able to perform in our roles.
Is there anything else an organisation can do to get on the forefront of this with implementing changes to be able to? Well, I'll take it back. I think the Future of Jobs report from the WEF came out earlier this year and spoke a lot about these sort of changes of industries, and whatnot, leading up to 2030. And I think one of the statistics that kind of stood out is the need to upskill current workforce as opposed to bringing in sort of new employees with those skills. And so when we look at upskill, is there anything to get on the forefront of this for organisations, in terms of upskilling their current workforce?
Well, again, I come back to, is it upskilling or is it re-looking at the capabilities required to perform the organisational strategy? And those capabilities may exist within the organisation or they may exist outside of the organisation. And we need to start thinking differently about fixed roles and bringing people in for 5-year terms to be able to sit in one seat in one organisational structure to perform specific tasks. Because the reality is those tasks are changing. The capabilities required by organizations are changing. So I think we need to think differently about employment rather than just looking at headcount and looking at org structures. We need to almost deconstruct those jobs and look at what are the tasks that need to be performed in order to deliver on our strategic roadmap. What are the capabilities required to deliver on those tasks? And what capabilities do we either have or do we need to go and buy, borrow, or build in order to be able to deliver on that strategic priority? And that buying and borrowing might be through consultancy, might be through outsourcing, might be through the gig economy. We're seeing a rise in fractional work, and particularly in the C-suite, that a lot of that's happening already in the UK and America. Versus what are we actually building from a capability perspective in organizations? Now, when it comes to building capability within organizations, it's digital literacy. Can you use AI? Can you use the tools that are allowing us to be able to drive efficiency? It's about judgment and decision making. It's about ethics and trust. It's about social and emotional intelligence, and ultimately being able to think critically at that higher level. Those are the main human advantages that we won't get from AI.
Wonderful. Well, look, that's all of my questions, Beth. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your insights. Really appreciate having you on. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.